The first thing that told me something was wrong wasn't the sign. It was a lock. A thick, polished steel lock hanging from the front gate of my grandfather's ranch, a place that had never been locked a single day in over 50 years. I just stood there for a moment, heat rising off the Texas dirt road, engine of my truck still ticking behind me, and that lock shining like it didn't belong. Because it didn't. Nothing about this did. 3 weeks earlier, I was standing in a hospital hallway, watching a doctor remove his glasses and tell me there was nothing more they could do. My grandfather, Thomas Carter, was gone, a man who survived droughts, debt, and decades of back-breaking work on that very land behind me, gone just like that. He left me everything. The ranch, 40 acres of open land, a creaky wooden house that groaned in the wind, a barn that leaned like it had secrets, and memories too many to count. I hadn't even had time to grieve properly. Between paperwork, probate, and packing up my life in the city, it had been a blur. But today was supposed to be different. Today was supposed to be the start of something new. Instead, I was staring at a lock that shouldn't exist. I stepped closer to the gate, ran my fingers over the metal. Brand new, heavy, expensive. Definitely not something my grandfather would have ever bought. He used to say, if someone wants to come onto your land, a lock won't stop him, but a good shotgun will. I almost smiled at the memory. Almost. That's when I saw it. A few feet to the right of the gate, stuck into the ground like a bad joke, a bright white sign with bold red letters. Sold. I blinked. No. That wasn't possible. I hadn't sold anything. I had just inherited it. My chest tightened as I walked toward the sign. There was a name printed underneath. Some real estate company I'd never heard of, a phone number, and a small logo in the corner that made my stomach twist. Ridgemore Property Association. Property Association? Out here? In the middle of nowhere? That didn't make any sense. There were no neighborhoods here. No rows of identical houses. No sidewalks or streetlights. Just land. Open, quiet, untouched land. I pulled out my folder from the truck, the one I'd been carrying everywhere for the past 2 weeks. Inside were the official documents. The will, the transfer of ownership, my name, Daniel Carter, clearly printed as a legal owner of this ranch. Stamped, signed, filed, real. So why did it feel like none of that mattered right now? Excuse me. The voice cut through the silence like a blade. Sharp, annoyed, entitled. I turned, and there she was, walking toward me like she had every right in the world to be here. Mid-50s, perfectly styled blonde hair, oversized sunglasses covering half her face, a clipboard tucked under her arm like it was some kind of weapon, and that walk, confident, purposeful, possessive, like she owned everything she looked at. You can't be here, she said before I could even speak. I stared at her for a second. I'm sorry. She stopped a few feet away, looking me up and down like I was something she found on the bottom of her shoe. This property is under private management, she said, tapping her clipboard, and it has already been sold. I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. No, I said, it hasn't. Her lips tightened instantly. Yes, it has. I stepped closer to the gate, gripping the metal. This is my ranch. She tilted her head slightly, then smiled, not a friendly smile, the kind of smile that says, you're about to be put in your place. Oh, honey, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. We've already handled the previous owner's situation. The words hit harder than I expected. Previous owner. That's what my grandfather was to her. A situation. What situation? I asked, my voice lower now. She flipped through her clipboard like she was bored of the conversation already. Property was considered abandoned, she said casually. No active resident. Multiple violations unresolved. The HOA stepped in and took control. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. HOA. I repeated. She nodded. Yes, Ridgemore Property Association. I looked around again. At the land. The empty fields. The old fence lines. You're telling me there's an HOA out here? I asked. She smiled wider. There is now. For a moment, I didn't say anything. because I was trying to decide whether this was stupidity or something worse. My grandfather lived here until the day he died. He wasn't absent. He wasn't gone. And even if he had been, you don't just take someone's land. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. No, I said finally, firm and steady. You don't have any authority here. Her expression changed. Slightly. The smile faded just a bit. I have full authority, she snapped. And the property has already been sold to new buyers. To who? I asked. That's not your concern. I actually laughed this time. Oh, it's absolutely my concern. She stepped closer now, close enough that I could see the irritation in her eyes behind those sunglasses. You need to leave, she said, her voice cold. Immediately. I shook my head. I'm not going anywhere. Her jaw tightened. If you refuse to leave, she said slowly, I will call the police. I didn't hesitate. Do it. For a second, she looked surprised, like she wasn't used to being challenged, like people usually just back down. Not today. She pulled out her phone, dialed 911 without breaking eye contact. Yes, she said, her voice suddenly shifting into something shaky and urgent. There's a man trespassing on private property. He's refusing to leave, and I feel threatened. I stared at her. Threatened? I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't taken a single step toward her, but she said it so easily, like it was just another tool in her toolbox. While she talked, I opened my folder again, pulled out the documents, held them up. You might want to take a look at these, I said. She didn't even glance at them. I don't need to, she snapped, covering the phone. I have HOA authority. That's when something shifted inside me, because that sentence, it didn't just sound wrong. It sounded practiced. She ended the call. They are on their way, she said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Good, I replied, because now I wanted witnesses. 10 minutes later, a sheriff's vehicle rolled up the Date Road, dust swirling behind it. 2 deputies stepped out, calm, observant, the kind of people who've seen enough nonsense to recognize it when they hear it. What seems to be the problem? One of them asked. Before I could answer, she jumped in. This man is trespassing, she said, pointing directly at me. Is refusing to leave property that has already been sold under HOA authority. The deputy looked at me. I handed him the documents. My grandfather owned this ranch, I said. He passed away. I inherited it. There's no HOA here. He took the papers, read them carefully, then looked at her. He said calmly, Do you have documentation proving this property falls under your HOA? For the first time since she walked up, she hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but I saw it. Oh, of course, she said quickly, flipping through her clipboard. But now, her movements weren't as smooth, her confidence not as solid. The deputy crossed his arms. Because according to these documents, he said, lifting my paperwork slightly, this land is privately owned, and there's no record of any HOA jurisdiction. Silence fell over the dirt road, heavy, uncomfortable. I took a step forward. Yeah, I said, locking eyes with her. So I'll ask again. Who exactly did you sell my ranch to? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. And in that moment, everyone standing there realized the same thing. She hadn't just made a mistake. She had crossed a line she couldn't come back from. For a moment, nobody spoke. The kind of silence that isn't empty, it's heavy, thick with tension. The deputy still held my documents in one hand. The other rested near his belt, not in a threatening way, just ready, watching, waiting. And Karen? She was flipping through her clipboard like the answer might magically appear if she turned enough pages. It didn't. I'm asking you one more time, the deputy said, calm but firmer now. Do you have proof that this property is under your HOA? She stopped flipping, looked up. Well, we have internal records. That's not what I asked. He cut in, her lips pressed into a thin line. That confidence you walked in with? It was cracking. I folded my arms. This should be simple, I said. Either you have legal authority or you don't. She turned toward me sharply. We followed proper procedure, she snapped. The property was non-compliant and... My grandfather lived here, I interrupted, until the day he died. That landed. You could see it. Not guilt, but irritation that her narrative wasn't working. Before she could respond, a low hum echoed down the dirt road. An engine. All three of us turned. A black SUV was approaching. Slow, deliberate, like it had somewhere important to be and expected the road to make way. Karen straightened instantly, and just like that, her confidence came back. Not all of it, but enough. They're here, she said, adjusting her sunglasses. The deputy frowned. Who's here? She smiled again. The new owners. My stomach dropped. No, there's no way. The SUV rolled to a stop behind the sheriff's vehicle. Dust drifted through the air as the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Mid-40s. Clean-cut. Polo shirt tucked into expensive jeans. The kind of guy who looked like he spent more time in meetings than outdoors. He glanced around, confused. Then his eyes landed on the sold sign. And then on Karen. Hi, she called out brightly, walking toward him like nothing had happened. You must be Mr. Hollis. He nodded slowly. Yeah, David Hollis, he said. I was told to meet here for the property handover. Handover. The word hit like a punch. Karen gestured toward the land like she was presenting a prize. Congratulations. This is your property. I actually laughed. Out loud. Couldn't help it. The man, David, looked at me, then at the deputies, then back at Karen. What's going on? He asked. I stepped forward. What's going on, I said, is that she's trying to sell you land she doesn't own. Karen spun toward me. That is not true. The deputy raised a hand. All right, everyone just slow down. David looked uneasy now. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folder. I wired the payment last week, he said. I have the agreement right here. My chest tightened. You've got to be kidding me. Can I see that? The deputy asked. David handed it over. The deputy opened it. Read. His expression didn't change much, but I saw his eyes narrow slightly. Well, Karen asked quickly, everything is in order, right? He didn't answer immediately, just kept reading, then flipped to the next page. And the next. I looked at David. How much did you pay for this place? I asked. He hesitated, then said quietly, $250,000. I let out a slow breath. 40 acres, a house, a barn, in Texas, even in rough condition. That price was suspiciously low. You got scammed, I said bluntly. Karen snapped. He did not get scammed. This was a legally processed sale under HOA authority. The deputy finally looked up. He said, I'm going to need you to stop talking for a moment. That shut her up. He turned to David. So, who exactly did you send this payment to? David pointed at the paperwork. Ridgemont Property Association, he said, through their acquisition office. The deputy nodded slowly, then looked at Karen. Do you represent this association? She straightened. Yes, I'm the acting president. All right, the deputy said. Then you won't mind explaining something. He held up the document. This contract isn't filed with the county. Silence. Karen blinked. What? There's no record of this transaction, he continued. No deed transfer. No title filing. Nothing. David's face went pale. What do you mean nothing? It means, the deputy said carefully, as far as the county is concerned, this property was never sold. All eyes turned to Karen. She laughed. A sharp, defensive sound. That's just a delay in processing, she said quickly. Paperwork takes time. Not like this, the deputy interrupted. I stepped closer. Let me guess, I said. No actual legal authority. No registered HOA. No right to sell anything. Her eyes flashed. You don't know what you're talking about. But now, nobody was really listening to her anymore. David ran a hand through his hair. Wait, he said. Are you telling me I just wired $250,000 for nothing? The deputy didn't sugarcoat it. I'm saying the situation needs to be investigated immediately. Karen took a step back. Just one, but it was enough. That crack from earlier, it was widening. Fast. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice rising. We followed procedure. The property was abandoned. We had every right. It wasn't abandoned, I said coldly. You just thought nobody would come back for it. That hit something. You could see it, because now she wasn't just defensive. She was angry. You people don't understand how these things work, she snapped. There are rules, standards. That place was falling apart. That place, I cut in, stepping closer, is my grandfather's home. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was heavy with realization. The deputy turned fully toward Karen now. He said, his tone no longer casual. I'm going to ask you one last time. Do you have ANY legal documentation proving your authority over this land? She opened her mouth, paused, looked at her clipboard, then at the SUV, then at the ground, and didn't answer. That was it. That was the moment. Everything shifted. The deputy nodded once. Slow, decisive. All right, he said. Here's what's going to happen. Karen looked up, and for the first time since she arrived, she didn't look in control. We're going to treat this as a potential fraud case, he continued, which means nobody is leaving until we sort this out. David exhaled sharply. I crossed my arms. And Karen? She just stood there, frozen, because now, this wasn't about control anymore. You could feel it in the air now. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. This was something bigger, something messy. And for the first time since I got there, Karen didn't look like she had all the answers. The deputy stepped a few feet away and spoke into his radio. Quiet, professional, focus, requesting verification, county records, property filings, anything tied to the so-called Ridgemore Property Association. Meanwhile, David just stood there, staring at the paperwork in his hands like it might suddenly fix itself. 250,000, he muttered under his breath. There's no way. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. But this wasn't just bad luck. This was targeted. You said they contacted you. I asked. He nodded slowly. Yeah, about a month ago. Said they were liquidating distressed rural properties under HOA control. Claimed it was a time-sensitive deal. Of course it was. Pressure. Urgency. Classic move. Did you ever visit the property before wiring the money? I asked. He shook his head. They said it wasn't accessible yet. Something about legal clearance in progress. I let out a dry laugh. Yeah, because they didn't want you meeting the actual owner. Karen snapped. That is not what happened. We all turned to her. She looked different now. Not composed. Not polished. Her voice had an edge to it. Sharp.